So we'll move on to a Q&A session now. And I do have one question in the queue here from Pavitra Ramahan. Thank you, Pavitra. Pavitra asks, what is the process of adding new mixed-use development sites implementing proprietary systems as part of their treatment BMP train within this platform? I'll just put that question onto the screen here so everybody can do that. So Austin, I think maybe Aaron, who's Aaron Pereski with Geosyntec is on the call too, could probably use a little help with this one. So mixed use development sites would be the WQMP or the parcel-based development functionality, and the treatment train component of the question. Aaron, do you or Austin, do you want to take a stab at that?
Part of what Eric and his team have been working on. The component, we would identify the site associated with the parcels in the county's parcel database to establish the spatial location of the site, and then identify the BMPs, add them through the workflow that John showed, and add a delineation to those. And proprietary treatment devices is one of the 20 types that Austin mentioned. That are supported. They're a pretty common BMP in Orange County, especially for development projects. And so you would select those, and there's a couple tiers of those and that have a generalized pollutant removal performance. If they were linked in a treatment train with something else, we have thought about that, and we have the ability to, instead of telling a BMP that it has a certain drainage area coming to it, instead link it to an upstream BMP. So say you receive flow from the discharge from this BMP. So for example, a proprietary system then draining to an infiltration tank or something along those lines could be modeled with these discrete elements. So it's a challenge that our users identified, and a very common thing. So the workflows support that well.
Yeah, and I'll also add on to that. That is something fairly common, as Aaron mentioned. As part of our staff and support project, we did wind up interfacing quite a bit with some of the different proprietary system manufacturers, and getting a lot of detailed specifications on exactly how they're working, and figuring out good ways to interface that with the Stormwater tools inventory.
So I wonder, any other questions from folks? Feel free to use the Q&A session or to raise your hand in the panelist window if there's any questions that you might have. While that's happening, I can bring up on the screen here. Log into the platform. So we have a question from Anthony Schütze. Can you describe the general BMP inventory assessment scoring criteria? Does the score automatically decrease annually, and what type of data is required? Yeah, it's a great question, Anthony. So let's take a look at that. So the second part, the score does not automatically decrease annually. The scoring is done in response to the observation. So there's depending on how often you'd like to assess your BMP, if you're going out and assessing it and seeing a material building up or damage to the BMP, that's what would drive the score decrease. There's not kind of an annual degradation component that's built in, although it is an interesting idea, and I could see that being a part of a program design, that if you're not assessing your BMPs because you can't get to them all, you might want to assume some degree of degradation. I'll just find an arbitrary BMP here through this Find a BMP page and click through to view the BMP details. The BMP detail page, Austin showed a little bit of this. Has a field visits panel, and I could come here and should have probably not just picked an arbitrary BMP and made sure that I was finding one that would be interesting, but let's roll with this. To do a field assessment in South Orange County, there's a requirement to do a certain number of dry weather and wet weather visits and post-storm visits. So that's a component that could be customized for particular jurisdictions' requirements. Enter the date of the field visit. And then when you're in the field, this workflow is designed to work well on a tablet. The field visit has several components. Reviewing and updating your inventory. Since you're there in the field, if your inventory is incomplete, you might choose to just take the opportunity to refresh the inventory while you're at the site, or you can skip the inventory part and move on to an assessment. And within the assessment for this particular BMP type, there's a number of observations that you would make. Some of them are pass-fail with the opportunity to add a note, and others, depending on how your BMP is configured, will have a quantitative component, and it's just percent of material that's accumulated. And then the BMP will receive a score based on the weighting that each of these observations has from 1 to 5. So after I have completed, in this case, the field visit workflow is set up with a kind of an initial assessment. And then the expectation is if you're in the field, you may be maintaining the BMP at the time, and then you could conduct a post-maintenance assessment. And that's kind of related to the fact that jurisdictions, permittees don't want to get docked for assessing a BMP that's in poor condition. That's not the intent of most permits, to penalize. The intent is to incentivize maintenance, right? So by supporting both an assessment and a post-maintenance assessment, we're kind of saying it's okay if you go to the BMP and it's full of trash. Maybe you need to be maintaining it more frequently, but what we want to demonstrate to the regulators is not only did you assess it and we're honest about the fact that it had filled up, you maintained it, removed the accumulated sediment. You can record the fact that you were, during this maintenance visit, material was removed, and then you can assess it again and get a higher score. And that's really a positive feedback loop that the permittees and the regulators would want to be able to share within the tool. Question from Dan Ashney here. Is there existing or potential functionality for alternatives analysis or future siting optimization? Yeah, that Dan is the planning module that Eric described in his what's next. So it's absolutely something that's on the product roadmap. And I know Orange County has interest in building that out and funding that component, but you know, we're definitely, you know, looking for partners who can leverage the functionality that's been built and may have an interest in expanding on to add these types of future features like alternatives analysis, planning modules, and future siting. I have another question here from Binhong Wu. For volume-based BMPs, such as detention or retention pond, what is the assumption on treatment rate? Do you keep tracking inflow to pond and bypass through based on water levels in the pond? Or do you, or is it just a general assumption? So Austin will take a cut at this one.
Yeah, sure. So our treatment rate nomographs are designed in particular for volume-based BMPs, and they're calculated using long-term continuous simulation. So we actually do a long-term continuous sizing calculation for a wide range of BMP volumes and expected drawdown times. And the reason we key on design drawdown time and BMP volume are those are two things that the client implementing registering a BMP in their system might know about that BMP. So they'll know how it was designed to function. They'll know the volume of it, the shape of it, and some design drawdown time. Or then maybe they know an underlying infiltration rate. And using either a design drawdown time or an underlying infiltration rate, we can use those two data points to enter our functional nomograph curve, which again was derived by doing thousands of runs of BMPs of various size, so that we can come up with a long-term estimate of how much volume, again, over like a 30-year period, that BMP will be expected. And then we perform that calculation using that percentage of capture based on the nomograph calculation. But yes, the volume-based BMPs their long-term performance is calculated based on long-term routed hydrology, based on like local rainfall gauges.
And we do, if there's any other questions, please, I'm happy to stay on for a few minutes if folks had more questions, but in the interest of, oh, I see Anthony looks like has a question. Damon, could you unmute Anthony? He's got his hand raised in the panelist window while you unmute Anthony, if that's possible. I'll just give my ending slide here, which is that we're really, our model for this technology is of a community of technology sharing. That the license that's on this technology allows anybody to take it and add to it and use it for your own purposes. There's no licensing costs and no vendor lock-in. This is not proprietary. This is community driven. Thanks to the vision of the partners in the Lake Tahoe region that Orange County has bought into. So we're very explicitly looking to expand this community and increase the number of folks who benefit from what's already been done and help benefit those who are already here. As the community grows, features become available at a lower cost than if you had to start from scratch, and in some cases at no cost at all if you're able to use, if your program's needs align with the program needs that are already in place. And this is completely customizable. This is not, we're not trying to position this as an off-the-shelf system that meets all of your needs up front, but rather there are core building blocks here that we know have common value across stormwater needs throughout the nation. But there's, if you don't see yourself perfectly in this, that's not a shortcoming of the tool. That's kind of part of this shared development model. So there's a couple of links here where you could go to learn more about this, particularly again, the GitHub repository for the source code, which we just make available to anybody under the terms of the community license, and then the Stormwater Tools service page.
So, John, Anthony stated that he was an accidental hand raised, but it looks like you do have a question from Morgan.
Okay, sorry for putting you on the spot there, Anthony. I have a question here from Morgan. I was late into the meeting, but do you differentiate between condition assessment and maintenance priority rating? In standard asset management protocols, the condition score is based on structural physical deterioration and routine maintenance needs, such as trash vegetation, sediment accumulation, that can be assessed with maintenance crews. Condition scores are more construction related, such as concrete pipe replacement, stabilization, major basin reconstruction. So the condition assessment and the maintenance priority rating are not distinguished in the rapid assessment methodology that is used here. The condition assessment in this platform is designed to focus primarily on how the condition affects pollutant load reduction, and less so on kind of the capital replacement aspect of the asset. But if there is a deterioration that is affecting the function of the asset in terms of how it can reduce load or treat volume, that would be captured in the protocol. But this notion of having kind of a distinction between, the construction related failures versus the maintenance priority is not something that's been needed or covered by the current assessment methodology. But I definitely hear and understand the distinction that you're making there, and could see that being valuable, and certainly something that the tool could be expanded to accommodate. So good question, Morgan. And then Morgan notes that they had challenges with drawing that distinction. Yeah, that's one I'd be happy to learn more about and hear what you've learned through that, learning to draw that distinction, Morgan. So if you're open to it, would love to have a follow-up to see what we could learn from your experience there. Okay, well, if there are any other questions, please, I really hope folks would, we'd love for this to be the first step in a continuing conversation if what you've seen is interesting here. Happy to meet with your programs and see, do some mutual learnings in terms of if this community technology could be of interest to you, and to help us identify what we could include on the roadmap to make this more broadly applicable. So thank you all so much for your time, to everybody attended. Thank you to Austin and Aaron with Geosyntec and Eric with Orange County Public Works for presenting on this with Sitka today, and to Damon Knight for facilitating behind the scenes. Thank you and take care.